For my entire childhood, my family called me the invisible one. My sister was the beautiful one. My brother was the brilliant one. I was just the ghost lingering in the background, the one nobody noticed until they needed someone to blame. At our massive family reunion, my aunt walked up to me with a stranger in tow, pointing at me like I was a stain on the pristine lawn. "This is the one we don't talk about," she laughed loudly. I looked at my aunt, then looked calmly at the stranger. The stranger pulled out a business card and looked my aunt dead in the eye. "Actually," she said, "I'm here because of her. You see, I had a secret. A massive one. Before I tell you how a single piece of paper destroyed my family's perfect illusion, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to stand up to a family who completely underestimated your worth. My name is Vanessa and I am 34 years old. Growing up in a wealthy suburb of Seattle meant absolutely everything was about appearances. My parents, Charles and Margaret, built their entire lives around looking perfect to their country club friends and extended relatives. From the outside looking in, we were the ideal American family. But inside the walls of our house, I was completely invisible. My parents had specific roles for each of their children, and if you did not fit the mold, you were cast aside. I was the one who did not fit. My sister Chloe was the beautiful one. She had flowing blonde hair, perfect skin, and a smile that could charm anyone. My brother Derek was the brilliant one. He was a lawyer, loud, confident, and endlessly praised. I was just the quiet one. The one who liked computers and books and staying out of the way. The annual family reunion was always the ultimate stage for my parents to show off their prized possessions, meaning Chloe and Derek. This year, the reunion was held at a luxury coastal estate in Monterey, California. The property was massive, featuring sweeping views of the Pacific Ocean, manicured gardens, and an enormous stone courtyard where dozens of my relatives were currently mingling. I stood off to the side near a large marble pillar holding a glass of sparkling water and observing the circus around me. I was dressed in an understated bespoke designer suit. It was a dark charcoal, tailored perfectly to my frame, and it cost more than the down payment on most cars. However, my family ignored it completely, assuming it was some cheap off-the-rack find from a discount store. They had always assumed the worst of me, and my wardrobe was no exception. My father, Charles, was holding court in the center of the patio. He was holding a glass of expensive scotch, gesturing wildly as he bragged to my uncles. My brother Derek was standing right beside him, soaking in the admiration. Derek had just become a senior partner at his law firm. My parents were broadcasting the news loudly, as if it was the greatest achievement in human history. On the other side of the courtyard was Chloe. She was surrounded by a gaggle of aunts and female cousins, showing off her left hand. She had recently gotten engaged to a man who came from old money, and she was making sure the sunlight caught her massive diamond ring from every possible angle. My mother, Margaret, was hovering right behind Chloe, touching her hair and telling everyone how beautiful the upcoming destination wedding was going to be. I leaned back against the cool marble pillar and let out a quiet sigh. I had driven 2 hours to get here, knowing exactly how this day would play out. For 34 years, I had endured this exact same dynamic. I was the practice child, the one they pushed into the shadows so the golden children could shine brighter. I was not beautiful enough to be a trophy wife like Chloe, and I was not the loud, aggressive lawyer they wanted Derek to be. I was quiet, analytical, and observant. Suddenly, my peripheral vision caught movement. My Aunt Pamela was marching across the patio, making a direct line toward me. Pamela was my mother's sister, and she shared the exact same toxic traits. She thrived on tearing other people down to make herself feel superior. Walking beside her was a sharply dressed woman, carrying a leather briefcase. The woman had an air of absolute authority about her, wearing a sharp tailored navy suit that commanded respect. I recognized her immediately, but I did not let it show on my face. Her name was Diana. Pamela had a wide, fake smile plastered across her face as she approached me. She was clearly trying to impress Diana, who Pamela likely assumed was a wealthy guest, or perhaps a representative of the estate's management. When she needed to provide a contrast to make Chloe and Derek look better, she always used me. "Well, look who decided to emerge from the shadows," Pamela announced loudly, ensuring that several nearby cousins turned to watch the interaction. She gestured toward me with a dismissive wave of her hand. "Diana, I was just telling you about my niece Chloe, the gorgeous bride-to-be, and my nephew Derek, the legal genius." Pamela let out a dramatic, exaggerated sigh and pointed directly at me. And this is Vanessa, the invisible one of the bunch. I did not blink. I just looked at Pamela, her face flushed with the thrill of putting me down. We do not talk about her much, Pamela continued, her voice dripping with pity and condescension. She just works with computers, fixing routers or something in a dark basement. She is our little family charity case. Pamela turned to Diana, expecting the stranger to laugh along or offer a sympathetic nod. Do not worry about her, Pamela added with a cruel smirk. She will probably never get married anyway. She just does not have the charm or the looks for it. She is quite the disappointment to my sister, but every family has one, right? The cousins nearby snickered quietly, holding their hands over their mouths. I could see my mother glancing over from across the courtyard, a look of mild annoyance on her face, as if my mere presence was ruining the aesthetic of her perfect family gathering. They all expected me to look down at my shoes. They expected me to shrink away in shame. That was the role I was supposed to play. The invisible one who knew her place at the very bottom of the family hierarchy. But I was no longer the scared, lonely girl they had bullied for decades. I stood perfectly still, maintaining eye contact with my aunt. The silence stretched between us thick and heavy. Diana, the sharply dressed stranger, did not laugh. She did not offer a sympathetic nod to my aunt. Instead, an expression of profound disgust washed over Diana's face as she looked at Pamela. The music playing over the outdoor speakers suddenly felt very far away. Diana reached into the inner pocket of her tailored navy blazer and pulled out a premium thick embossed business card. She held it out not to me but to Pamela. Actually, Diana said, her voice ringing out clear and authoritative. Cutting through the ambient noise of the party, I am here because of her. Pamela blinked, her fake smile faltering as she stared blankly at the business card. What do you mean? Pamela stammered. Are you her manager at the ET help desk? Diana took a step forward, closing the distance between them. I am the lead corporate attorney for a private holding group, Diana stated firmly, and she is my boss. The blood completely drained from Pamela's face. Over by the catering table, my brother Derek stopped talking mid-sentence. My mother turned fully around to stare at us. Diana did not lower her voice. In fact, she made sure it carried across the patio. Vanessa is the founder and chief executive officer of the country's most elite data defense firm, Diana announced to the stunned crowd. And as of exactly 1 hour ago, she is the majority shareholder of the investment group that just acquired this entire coastal estate. My aunt's jaw practically unhinged. She looked at me, then back at Diana, then back at me again as if her brain could not process the information. My sister Chloe lowered her left hand, her diamond ring suddenly forgotten by the people around her. My father almost dropped his glass of scotch. I remained perfectly calm. I reached out and took the heavy manila folder that Diana offered me. It contained the final deed transfer documents for the very ground my family was currently standing on. I let a slow, deliberate smile spread across my face as I looked at the shocked, silent faces of the people who had spent my entire life calling me a failure. The game had completely changed, and they had no idea what was about to hit them. The silence that fell over the courtyard was absolute. It was the kind of quiet that feels heavy, pressing down on the lungs of everyone present. For 34 years I had been the family ghost, the punchline to their cruel jokes. Now the ghost had just handed them an eviction notice disguised as a deed. Pamela was the first to break the stillness. Her face twitched, her heavy makeup suddenly looking like a fragile mask. This is some kind of sick joke, she stammered, her voice unnaturally high. You hired an actress, Vanessa, to come here and ruin your sister's special day? It is pathetic, really. Diana did not even blink. She stepped forward and her presence commanded the space. There is no prank being played here, Pamela. If you look closely at the documentation my client is holding, you will see the official seal of the state and the certification from the county clerk. The firm Vanessa built from the ground up acquired the Monterey Coastal Holding Group 48 hours ago. The ink is dry. The wire transfers have cleared. My father pushed his way through the crowd of stunned cousins. His face was a dark mottled red. He snatched the manila folder from my hands without asking. He always believed he was entitled to anything I had. I let him take it. I wanted him to read it. I wanted him to see the numbers printed in black and white. He stared at the documents, his eyes darting back and forth. His hands began to shake slightly. This cannot be right, my father muttered, his voice losing its usual booming authority. The holding group was not even listed on the open market. We have been trying to negotiate a stake in this property for months. How did you even get access to the seller? I kept my posture relaxed, my hands resting comfortably at my sides. I did not need to be aggressive. True power does not need to shout. When you run the data security infrastructure for the private equity firm that owned the holding group, I explained calmly, they tend to favor your acquisition bids. They wanted a fast, quiet cash sale. I provided exactly that. Derek finally marched over, abandoning his audience of younger cousins. He grabbed the papers out of our father's hands, aggressively scanning the pages. Derek had always built his identity on being the smartest person in the room. He was the legal prodigy, the son who was supposed to carry the family legacy. The idea that I had outmaneuvered him was completely breaking his brain. "This is heavily leveraged," Derek declared, pointing a finger at me. "You probably took out a massive loan against some inflated tech startup valuation. You are drowning in debt just to show off at a family party. It is a shell game." Diana looked at my brother with a mixture of pity and professional disdain. "Mr. Anderson, my client does not rely on leverage for personal acquisitions. The purchase of this $22 million estate was executed entirely in cash. Her firm carries zero corporate debt and she retains 80% equity in the company. Your sister is not playing a shell game. She is the bank." The words $22 million in cash echoed across the stone patio. I heard my Aunt Susan drop her champagne flute. It shattered against the flagstone, but nobody moved to clean it up. The catering staff stood completely frozen, holding trays of appetizers and watching the drama unfold like a scene from a movie. My sister Chloe shoved her way to the front. Her perfect hair was blowing in the ocean breeze, and her face was contorted into an ugly expression of confusion and panic. "What does that even mean?" she demanded. "What is she talking about?" "It means I own the venue for your engagement party, Chloe," I said. "I own the gardens you wanted for your wedding photos. I own the private beach you were just bragging about to your friends. I own every square inch of this estate." Chloe gasped and instinctively clutched her diamond engagement ring, as if I was about to reach out and take that too. She looked at our mother for support. Margaret was still standing near the catering tent, her face completely drained of color. For my entire life, my mother had controlled the narrative. She dictated who was successful, who was beautiful, and who was worthy of love. Seeing me standing there, holding the deed to a property she could only dream of owning completely shattered her reality. "You lied to us," my mother finally spoke, her voice trembling with indignation. "You let us believe you were working some entry-level tech job. You let us worry about your future." "I did not lie to you, Mother," I replied, keeping my tone perfectly even. "I simply stopped correcting your assumptions. You decided I was a failure when I was a teenager because I did not fit your exact mold. When I tried to talk to you about my business, you changed the subject to Chloe's dating life or Derek's promotions. You never asked if I was happy. You just assumed I was struggling because it fit the story you wanted to tell." Pamela tried to regain her footing, crossing her arms and lifting her chin. "Well, if you are so wealthy now, why are you dressed like that? You could have at least made an effort for a family event instead of showing up in that drab suit." Diana actually chuckled, a dry, sharp sound. "That drab suit, Pamela, is a custom piece tailored specifically for Vanessa in Milan. It costs more than your entire jewelry collection. Just because she does not feel the need to cover herself in flashy labels. To prove her worth does not mean she lacks taste. It simply means she has nothing to prove to people who judge books by their covers." Pamela's mouth snapped shut. She looked down at her own heavy gold bracelets, suddenly looking very self-conscious. The power dynamic in the courtyard had completely inverted. The family members who had spent the last hour ignoring me or whispering cruel jokes were now staring at me with a mixture of fear and profound respect. My father tried to salvage his pride. He stood up straighter, adjusting his expensive tie. "Well then," he said, forcing a booming laugh that sounded incredibly hollow. "It seems we have a lot to celebrate today. We should open a special bottle of champagne. The Anderson family has truly conquered the world." He stepped forward, holding his arms out as if to embrace me. He wanted to claim my victory as his own. He wanted to fold my empire into the Anderson family legacy. I took a deliberate step backward, avoiding his embrace. My father's arms fell awkwardly to his sides. The forced smile on his face cracked. "We are not celebrating my success today, Dad," I said. "Because my success has nothing to do with this family. I built my company in spite of you. I built it while you were busy telling your country club friends that I was your practice child." My father flinched. He had always assumed I did not hear the cruel things he said behind my back. "Vanessa, please," he murmured. his voice dropping to a low warning register. Do not do this here, not in front of everyone. Keep family business private. You did not care about privacy when Aunt Pamela was humiliating me 5 minutes ago, I pointed out. You only care about privacy now because you are the ones feeling embarrassed. I turned to face the crowd of relatives. Enjoy the reunion, I said, projecting my voice so every single person on the patio could hear me clearly. Please eat, drink, and take as many photos as you like. The catering has already been fully paid for by my company as a courtesy. Treat this estate as if it were your own, because as of today it is mine. I turned my back on them and walked toward the massive glass doors of the main house. I did not look back to see my father's rage or my sister's tears. The sea of relatives parted for me, stepping out of my way. But I knew the peace would not last. My mother was not the type to surrender her control without a vicious fight. Before I could even reach the threshold, I could hear the sharp, frantic clicking of her designer heels marching rapidly right behind me. Vanessa, wait. My mother's voice cracked like a whip through the open glass doors. I paused just inside the grand foyer. Diana gave me a brief knowing look and discreetly stepped further down the hall to give us privacy. I turned slowly as my mother marched inside, her face a mask of barely contained fury. She grabbed my upper arm, her manicured fingernails digging into my jacket sleeve, and yanked me into a private alcove. What do you think you are doing? She hissed, her voice a frantic whisper. You come here after barely speaking to us for a year and pull a stunt like this, buying the estate out from under your brother's firm? It is petty, Vanessa. It is incredibly petty and vindictive. I looked down at her hand, gripping my arm, then back up to her face. I am not trying to upstage anyone, Mother. I simply bought a piece of real estate that my company found valuable. You are the ones who made it a spectacle. My mother dropped my arm but stepped closer, invading my personal space. You knew Cameron has been trying to secure this property for months. This was supposed to be his big victory lap today, and you ruined it just to show off. I laughed, a short, harsh sound that echoed in the small alcove. Derek has been fumbling this deal for 6 months because his firm lacks the liquid capital to make a competitive offer. The sellers wanted a buyer who could close the deal immediately. My company had the funds. We made the offer. That is business, Mother. It has nothing to do with upstaging Derek. My mother's eyes narrowed. You always had a jealous streak. Even when you were little, you could not stand it when Derek or Chloe got attention. You always had to act out to try and steal the spotlight. The audacity of her gaslighting was breathtaking. You want to talk about jealousy? I said, my voice dropping an octave. Let's talk about the summer before I started college. I earned early admission to MIT. But you and Dad absolutely refused to co-sign my student loans. You told me it was a waste of money because I would probably just drop out. You said it was too risky investment for a degree I would never use. My mother waved her hand dismissively. We were trying to be realistic. We did not want you burdened with debt if you changed your mind. 2 days later, you bought Chloe a brand new Mercedes convertible for her high school graduation, I countered. You paid for it in cash. You told everyone it was a reward for her hard work. She barely maintained a C average. I was valedictorian. You did not refuse my loans to protect me. You refused them because you did not believe I was capable of achieving anything. My mother crossed her arms, adopting a defensive posture. And look how well you turned out. You should be thanking us. We taught you independence. We gave you the drive to succeed. I stared at her, genuinely stunned by her ability to twist her own neglect into a parenting victory. You do not get to take credit for my survival, I told her coldly. You threw me into the deep end, hoping I would drown so you would not have to deal with the disappointment of raising me. You taught me that the people who are supposed to love you unconditionally will abandon you the second you fail to meet their expectations. She flinched, but her pride would not let her concede. You are being overly dramatic, Vanessa. We always loved you. We just had different ways of showing it. I stepped out of the alcove, leaving my mother standing in the shadows. We are done here, Mother. Go back to your party. Enjoy the champagne. I walked down the hallway, my heels clicking decisively on the polished marble floor. Behind me, I heard my mother let out a frustrated sound, a sharp intake of breath that signaled her loss of control. I did not look back. I had delivered the message, and I knew she had heard it. But I also knew the war was far from over. My family did not surrender easily, and Derek would not take this humiliation lying down. He was waiting for me in the courtyard. He deliberately stepped into my path, holding a fresh glass of scotch. He wanted a public spectacle. Well, look who decided to rejoin the adults, Derek announced. It is cute that your little tech startup managed to scrape together a bid for this place. But we all know how this game is played. You secured a mezzanine loan against an inflated tech valuation. You are drowning in debt just to show off. I did not raise my voice. Let's talk about hard data, Derek. You think my company writes simple lines of code? We do not. We secure the global financial infrastructure for institutional investors. We see the real ledgers. I see everything. I looked directly into his eyes. You want to talk about leverage? Let's look at your law firm. Dad was bragging earlier about how you were just made senior partner. But they did not promote you because of your brilliant legal strategies. They promoted you because they desperately needed a capital injection. Your firm is trying to cover a 34% drop in quarterly revenue following that disastrous default in Chicago last month, a default you personally managed. Derek went completely rigid. The blood vanished from his face. That is confidential firm information, he stammered. You cannot possibly know that. I know that your client retention rate has plummeted 19% since January. I continued relentlessly. I know that 2 of your anchor funds are operating at a net loss. You are hemorrhaging liquidity, Derek. You are drowning. You do not want to manage this estate to save me. You desperately need to secure the management fees to cover your own margin calls. Derek physically stepped back from me, his shoulders slumped. The brilliant older brother had been completely dismantled in less than 3 minutes. I had stripped away his entire identity in front of the people he cared about impressing the most. My father stepped forward, his voice shaking. Vanessa, that is enough. You have made your point. There is no need to humiliate your brother in front of the family. He started this conversation, Dad, I pointed out. He attempted to humiliate me publicly to assert his dominance. I simply finished the conversation with accurate data. If the truth humiliates him, that is his failure, not mine. I turned away from my father and my brother. The crowd of relatives remained frozen in place, watching me with a newfound sense of awe and profound fear. I had not just defeated the golden boy, I had utterly destroyed the illusion of his success. Deanna was waiting for me at the base of the staircase. Shall we proceed to the boardroom, Ms. Anderson? She asked, her professional tone ringing out clearly in the quiet courtyard. The executive team is waiting on the secure line. Yes, Diana, let us go. I have wasted enough time here. I climbed the grand sweeping staircase of my newly acquired estate, feeling lighter than I had in 34 years. The financial intimidation tactic had failed spectacularly. The family hierarchy was officially dead, and I was the one holding the shovel. 2 hours later, I concluded my board meeting. Diana informed me that the caterers had finished setting up the formal dinner on the oceanfront terrace. I headed downstairs, knowing exactly what was waiting for me. Predators do not simply surrender when they are disarmed. They just change their camouflage. As I stepped onto the terrace, the atmosphere was jarringly different. My mother practically sprinted across the tiles to greet me. Her previously mask-like face was now stretched into a wide, beaming smile of sheer maternal devotion. Vanessa, darling, she sang out, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. We have been waiting for you to start dinner. You simply must come see what I have done with the seating arrangements. Before I could pull my hands away, she linked her arm firmly through mine and paraded me through the crowd. She brought me straight to the head of the table, the seat of honor, the seat my father had occupied at every single family holiday since the day I was born. She had literally taken a pen, crossed out his name, and written mine in sweeping cursive lettering. I took my seat slowly. The sudden shift in their strategy was entirely predictable. They realized that outright intimidation had failed. Now they were attempting to sedate me with fake affection. During dinner, the conversation was entirely focused on me. Aunts and uncles who had ignored me for years were suddenly fascinated by my firm. Pamela kept offering to refill my wine glass and praising the tailoring of my suit. My mother acted as if my success was the direct result of her brilliant parenting. Then my father stood up and tapped his glass. Vanessa has proven she possesses the true Anderson spirit, he announced, and with great success comes great responsibility. That is why I am proud to announce that Vanessa has agreed to make a primary investment to stabilize Derek's law firm and fund Chloe's destination wedding. The room erupted in applause. They were cornering me in front of 50 relatives, using social pressure to force my compliance. My father raised his glass. To Vanessa, I did not touch my champagne flute. I let the echoes of their toast fade into the ocean breeze. Then I pushed my chair back and stood up. "Thank you for that incredibly imaginative fiction, Dad," I said. "But let me offer a slight correction. I will not be investing a single dollar into Derek's failing firm, and I will certainly not be financing a $150,000 Italian vacation for Chloe." The silence that hit the terrace was absolute. "Since we are sharing announcements tonight, let me be perfectly clear. My company acquired this estate because it is a prime commercial asset. That is where my financial involvement with this family begins and exactly where it ends. I am not a bank, I am not a bailout fund, and I am definitely not paying a belated entry fee to be accepted by people who spent my entire life pretending I did not exist." Chloe dropped her facade first, her lower lip curled into an ugly sneer. "You cannot do this," she shrieked. "Dad just told everyone you were paying for the wedding. I cannot back out of an agreement I never made, Chloe." My mother shot up from her chair, pointing a shaking finger at me. "How dare you? We welcomed you back with open arms. You are exactly the same selfish, ungrateful brat you have always been. You did not welcome me back, Mother. You welcomed my bank account. You thought you could flatter me into submission, but I am not the insecure teenager desperate for your approval anymore. I see exactly what you are doing." Derek stood up, his face slick with sweat. "You know what your problem is, Vanessa? You are bitter. You have always been bitter because you are the invisible one. You have all this money, but you have no life. You are a lonely, sad woman taking out her pathetic jealousy on her younger sister because Chloe is actually beautiful and loved." Chloe eagerly jumped onto the bandwagon. "She is just jealous. She knows she will never get a ring like this. She is trying to ruin my wedding because she knows she will never have one of her own." The insults rained down exactly as they had when I was a child. They attacked my appearance, my relationship status, my desirability. They reverted to the most basic, shallow metrics of worth, because that was the only currency they understood. I let them rant. I stood there with my hands clasped loosely in front of me, maintaining perfect eye contact with each of them as they hurled their venom. I did not raise my voice. I did not cry. I just watched them exhaust their limited vocabulary of insults. When Derek finally ran out of breath and Chloe stopped shouting, the terrace grew quiet again. I reached into the inner pocket of my tailored suit jacket and pulled out a thick manila envelope. "Are you quite finished?" I asked. My voice was calm, cold, and completely unbothered. "You talk about high-powered lawyers, Dad. You threaten to file injunctions and freeze my assets. But you are forgetting one critical detail. I did not buy the property deed. I bought the entire holding company. I own the corporate trust that holds the deed to your primary residence. As of 9:00 this morning, I am the absolute sole owner of the building your son works in and the house you sleep in." My mother let out a high-pitched gasp. "What does that mean?" "It means I am your landlord, Mother. I own the roof over your heads and the floor beneath your desks." Derek stumbled backward, gripping the stone railing. "You cannot do that. That is illegal." "It is standard corporate acquisition," Diana corrected. "But let's talk about what is actually illegal. When you and Margaret attempted to forge Vanessa's signature on a $4 million mortgage application, you crossed a very specific legal line. You transmitted fraudulent financial documents across state lines. Your scheme elevated from simple state-level fraud to a massive federal crime." My father's breathing became shallow and rapid. "You filed it," he whispered. "You actually filed it with the federal authorities." "I provided the federal authorities with irrefutable digital proof of your attempted bank fraud," Diana stated. The federal judge granted an emergency injunction. As of 3 this afternoon, every single bank account associated with this family has been completely frozen. Chloe let out a sharp, agonizing scream. "Frozen? My accounts too?" "Any account that received embezzled funds," Diana confirmed. "Your credit cards, your checking accounts, your savings, everything is locked pending a comprehensive federal investigation." My mother began hyperventilating. She pulled her smartphone from her clutch purse, frantically opening her banking app. "Access denied. Account suspended. No, no, no!" I looked at my family, the broken, ruined remnants of the people who had tortured me for 3 decades. I felt absolutely nothing for them. No anger, no sadness, no pity. The emotional tether that had tied me to their approval had been completely severed. I held out my hand and Diana placed 3 pristine documents directly into my palm. I dropped the first one in Derek's lap. "That is a formal 30-day notice to vacate commercial premises. Your firm has 1 month to pack up." I dropped the second document at my mother's feet. "And this is your residential eviction notice. You have 30 days to vacate the premises. My mother scrambled forward, grabbing the hem of my trousers. Vanessa, please, she begged. You cannot do this to us. Where will we go? Our accounts are frozen. We will be homeless. You threw me out onto the street 15 years ago, Mother. You gave me 1 week to pack my bags. You told me I was an embarrassment and you slammed the front door in my face. I slept on a mattress on the floor of an unheated studio apartment. I survived on instant noodles and tap water. I figured it out. You are a smart woman, Mother. I am sure you will figure it out too. I gently pulled my leg back, forcing her hands to slip off my suit. My mother collapsed entirely, pressing her forehead against the cold stone, weeping with an intensity that shook her entire frame. I placed the third eviction notice in front of my father. He slowly raised his head to look at me. His eyes were bloodshot, and his face looked 20 years older than it had when the sun came up this morning. You really did it, he whispered. You completely destroyed us. I did not destroy this family, Dad. You did. You built an empire entirely out of glass and vanity. You demanded absolute perfection. You created an environment so toxic that Derek became a criminal just to avoid disappointing you. You taught Chloe that her only value was in her appearance. You taught Mother that social status was the only metric of human worth. I took a step back, taking in the complete devastating ruin of the golden children and the perfect parents. For my entire life, you all called me the invisible one. You told me I was a failure because I did not want to play your shallow, vicious games. You told me over and over again that I did not fit in with this family. You were right about one thing, Dad. I do not fit in with the Andersons because I do not steal. I do not lie, and I do not lose. I turned away from the dining table. Diana stepped into stride beside me. We walked together across the sprawling travertine terrace, moving away from the wreckage. The sun was setting over the Pacific Ocean, casting long, brilliant streaks of gold across the water. The cool evening breeze carried the scent of salt and freedom. For decades, I had walked through the world making myself small to avoid their cruelty. I had accepted the role of the invisible one because it was the only space they allowed me to occupy. But the shadows had forged me into something made of steel and data and unrelenting willpower. I stepped through the grand glass doors of the coastal mansion, leaving my family behind in the dark. The house was quiet, spacious, and completely mine. The operation was over. The past was dead, and the future was entirely in my control. The greatest lesson I learned from being called the invisible one is that the people who try the hardest to diminish your worth are almost always terrified of your potential. For decades, my family used cruelty and superficial metrics to keep me in the shadows. They believed that beauty was a currency and that success was defined by country club memberships and designer labels. But true ugliness has nothing to do with your physical appearance. True ugliness is living a life built on lies, manipulation, and stepping on others to elevate yourself. When you are the family scapegoat, it is incredibly easy to internalize their toxic narrative and believe you are inherently flawed. But I am here to tell you that their inability to love you is a reflection of their own brokenness, not your value. You do not owe your loyalty, your financial security, or your sanity to people who only view you as an inconvenience or an asset to be exploited. The shadows they force you into can become the exact place where you forge your greatest strength. Have you ever been the scapegoat in your family? Have you ever had to walk away from toxic relatives to protect your own peace and build your own success? Share your experiences in the comments below. And if my journey to reclaiming my power resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about setting firm boundaries, surviving toxic families, and turning your deepest pain into your greatest triumph. Remember, your worth is never determined by someone else's inability to see it.